Welcome all to the call today. We're going to give it like 2 more minutes to let your colleagues jump on over from the meeting that's just wrapping up now. I see a lot of folks still joining the call, so we will get started in just a minute or two. All right, Steve, the folks that are joining, looks like it's slowing down. If you'd like to go ahead and kick the call off.
Sure. Well, good to see you all today. Excited to get to spend a few minutes with you. Before we begin, I just want to start with a thank you for all of you that did participate in our recent stakeholder survey. We had very strong response from retail and retail program managers in particular, and we really appreciate that. I can tell you that your response is already being looked at and thought about how we can better serve you, and we just so appreciate your willingness to do that. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide, Deanna. A little bit about, of course, conferences coming up very soon in Dallas. I think you should all have received more than a little bit of information about it, but it's going to be a great conference. I'm going to have Deanna talk a little bit about the retail track in general, but I'm going to talk a little bit about before the general sessions and some of what we have going that I think would be of great interest to you. I'm really excited that Frank Yanis is going to be doing a special session on food safety culture and spending some time really talking about how do we integrate food safety culture into regulatory programs in a very broad method. So that's going to be a great session. Having seen him speak and teach on this topic a number of times, I think it's going to be people will really enjoy this opportunity to get to see him and to participate. And if I know him, it'll be highly interactive and a great opportunity. Another thing that we're really excited about in the general session this year is we are going to also bring back Jason Evans from Johnson and Wales University. I know many of you are familiar with Jason. He's been almost become a perennial speaker at our conference, kind of focusing on some of those human skills or working with each other. This time he's really going to talk a little bit about how do we do better about communicating with humans in a world where we spend a lot of time texting, emailing, and those sorts of things. How do we build those human relationships that can be ongoing and build our professional network? So we're excited to have him come back and do that session. I will pre-warn you, we're going to do the federal sessions a little differently this year, recognizing the travel restrictions that are happening at the federal government. We are going to do a special pre-session on June 17th with our federal folks from FDA, CDC, and FSIS, and also a special session with the folks over at the FDA Office of Partnerships. So just heads up, that'll be coming available, and it won't matter. We'll be inviting all of our program leaders from all of our programs to participate in that special session, regardless of whether they're attending conference. We just wanted to have to make sure that we were able to include them in a way and not have the stress of making a decision at the last minute whether that was going forward. And we're hearing really positive feedback. So for doing that. So heads up, that's coming your way. I'm going to stop talking too much about conference, but for those of you that are, I don't know, I didn't notice. Let's see if Adam Inman is here or not today. But if Adam were here, I'd tell him this is a good year for you because live band karaoke has come back. So if you want to have a little fun, there's nothing like having a live band behind you and doing karaoke. It's a pretty good experience, and I know Adam. It will be one that will probably enjoy that. So just one more thing. Beyond that, I will say it's going to be a pretty exciting program. We're going to have lots of great sessions. Retail track is wonderful. So be great opportunity to come and join us in Dallas. And we look forward to seeing many and all of you there. Go ahead and Deanna, I think you're going to talk a little bit about the retail track.
Yes. Just wanted to let you all know that we have been hard at work planning some awesome tracks for our retail breakout sessions. We're going to do a combined session, though, with the food track for the food break foodborne illness outbreak session with Frank Giannis himself. So that one we are very excited about. We have some industry communication
Deanna,
panels. Yes,
can I tell them what that session's going to be about?
yes, you can tell them.
I think they'll be pretty excited to hear that. So Frank is actually going to, for the first time, publicly present the boar's head root cause analysis from the boar's head outbreak, which I think will be a pretty interesting discussion, along with some other leaders participating. But the largest portion will be Frank talking about what they found and how they can fix it going forward. So really a good session, and I think you all will enjoy that. So.
Yes, and once Steve told me what the topic was and that Frank was presenting it, I was like, I don't know that we can top that. So we'll just have to have you all in there and hear that one for yourself. We've got special processes.
I see we
Yes.
have a technical problem. We have some people over on the team. There was actually a Teams link included in this too.
Shouldn't have been a Teams link included. Oh my goodness.
Tell you what, you talk about this. I'll go to the Teams link and send them over here.
Thank you so much.
I'll be back in 2 minutes.
The updates, just kind of keep sneaking that in there, even though I don't check the box. All right. Well, thank you for letting me know that. We're doing a speed dating session with special processes. So we will have stations set up for each special process that we know that folks see in the field and answer questions. We'll have an active managerial control activity workshop, plus an interactive risk control plan session, along with some pest control experts from some universities. And we're going to present some new research on hand washing, and there is so much more. So we are really, really excited for y'all to be there. I hope to see each and every one of you and bring multiple people so that you don't miss any tracks if there are other sessions that you want to attend. All right. Also, from the AEC, we do have a workshop, pre-conference workshop on Saturday from 1 to 5. And this is all about how to build your risk-based inspections program, how to make it stronger. Once your staff are out in the field doing risk-based inspections, well, how do you manage that? And what can you do to build on it and improve it? So please take a look. We have some other great pre-conference workshops, but this is the one that I'm teaching. So I really wanted y'all to know about it. And hope to see y'all there. Reach out to me if you have any questions on this workshop. But there's a lot of great information and it's very interactive. It's not just a presentation. So you will leave with an evaluation of your own program and how you're doing with your risk-based inspections, and a plan to make some improvements to be more effective and efficient and aligned with those best practices. So thank you so much for checking that out. Plus the other pre-conference workshops are pretty awesome too, but I only made a slide for mine. And also we had one of these last year. We want you to know that we're having another one this year. It's the Retail Program Manager Meeting. It's an invitation-only event where we can have an open forum to discuss those topics that are most important to you, and to hear from your colleagues and what challenges they're facing and how they're doing certain things. And goodness, people just keep joining this call. Wow. Steve, are you back yet?
I am back. And I think we've got all.
Do you want to talk more about the program manager meeting?
Sure. Well, as you recall, we did do this last year. Many of you were able to join us for the meeting last year. But it was a great opportunity. We got very positive feedback from the participants. So it'll be more of the same, but taking into account more of what you wanted to make sure was included going forward. So we hope that you can join this. We do have some great registration already for it, but we will also be bringing back our folks from DC to talk a little bit about what's happening legislatively there, and doing a little bit of some updates from the FDA side and what's happening on the federal level there. But we're looking forward to it. If there are specific topics you want covered, make sure to give us that feedback or want to discuss. We will absolutely do that. So for the retail side, when we move over to retail, Lori Farmer has confirmed she'll be participating virtually, joining us on Sunday morning virtually, and having a little bit of a discussion with you all on some of what's happening on the retail food safety side from FDA. So we're looking forward to that and hope you can join us for that session. Once again, you should have an email. If you don't have that email inviting you, let us know and we'll get you one to do that. One note is, if this session, you do not have to be registered for the conference to attend. This is one that if you happen to want to come for a day and just do the program manager session, it is a freebie and you are invited to do that. So, okay, moving on. Next thing, our last for the spring Fresh Take Fridays will be coming up on May 16th. Talking to folks that work every day on Capitol Hill in DC, talking a little bit about the policy landscape ahead, food safety, agriculture in the new administration. We're looking forward to this presentation. I think it's probably been rewritten 10 times since we introduced it, but I'm sure that they will have some great insight of what's happening on that front. And I'm looking forward to seeing their presentation. I saw an earlier version of it and it was excellent. So we're excited to have them join us and talk a little bit about what's going on the Hill. And that'll be right as we move into appropriation season for FY26. We'll just be beginning. So it'll be a great time to hear from them. Okay, moving on. We do have some upcoming trainings we just wanted to mention. Basic inspections and investigations for new manufacturer retail inspectors. There's a handful of seats left for that course in May, and then another course coming in September. Those are all virtual courses. If you have any questions about that, let us know. But like I said, there are just a few seats left in the May course if you're interested. In addition, if you would like to use materials out of that course for your own trainings, for your own inspectors, your own local agencies, as the case may be, there will be a Train the Trainer that's being hosted by the Ohio Department of Agriculture in Columbus, Ohio, July 15th through the 18th. This Train the Trainer course gets you all the materials so you can go off and do it yourself and take what pieces you'd like to use for your own training program. So if you're interested, go ahead and get signed up. If you have any questions, email us at afto@afto.org and we'll get you some answers. But and once again, a big thank you to Ohio for hosting that course for us. We're excited to bring this Train the Trainer back to you all and provide that opportunity for you to use it locally. Moving to the next slide. Just a couple other virtual trainings coming up. Evaluating active managerial control for regulators is coming up July 30th to 31st, along with root cause analysis for retail will be September 29th through October 2nd. The full training schedule for what I'm going to call academic year, I'm going to pretend it's academic year 25-26 will be released in July or in May for essentially beginning September 1 going forward. We just have a few previews for early in the new academic year that are out there right now. So heads up, that's coming your way soon. Okay.
All right, can I just add one more thing about this?
Yes.
I just want everyone on the call to know that we can bring these classes to you. So if you're interested in any of these courses to have in your state or at your agency, Steve already mentioned the basic inspections and investigations, a Train the Trainer version, root cause analysis, or even the environmental sampling workshop. Just reach out to us and we would really love to work with you to get that scheduled to help meet your needs.
Absolutely. Thank you. I should have mentioned that. Of course, FDA 215 and 218 are coming up. Virtual offerings in both May and June. There are some seats available. Those are FDA sponsored and paid for courses. If you're interested, the link to register is there. And then lastly, I always have to put in the last item for our discussion today is the AFTO Credential Series. If we're seeing very positive participation from the Credential Series. If you're interested in learning more, be interested in taking that to your program in a greater way, let us know. We'd be happy to talk with you and see how we can craft a program that works for your agency. So I think that was my last slide. Am I right, Deanna?
I think it was. This one is my slide where I am going to ask all of you on the call please fill out the evaluations after the call today because I want to know what you want to hear about. It's a really short evaluation. It's just 5 questions. And if there's something that your agency is doing that's really novel and you want to share, this would be a great place for you to share that with your colleagues. So please fill out the evaluation. Let us know what you want to hear about because our topics today are based on these evaluations. We do listen, we read every single one. And if you want to hear about it, it's an important topic to you, then we will do our best to get it hosted on this call. All right, so with that, I am going to turn it over to our first presenter today, Miss Glenda Lewis, who really doesn't need an introduction. I think we all know her and what great work she does. So she's going to give us a short welcome and a quick update before we get into our food additive session. So Glenda, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Deanna. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I don't have a series of slides, but I did want to say hello to everyone and just give an update on where we are after the Conference for Food Protection. We're actively working and awaiting the conference letter to FDA. The conference has 45 days to submit, up to 45 days after the conference to submit their letter to the federal agencies. And we anticipate that'll be around May 12th. And the federal agencies have 60 days after that to respond within that time frame. And so we're actively looking at the final recommendations that were right now they're listed on the CFP website. If you go to foodprotect.org and you'll see the CFP's 2025 meeting, click on that. You scroll all the way down to the bottom. You'll see the final recommendations that are listed there in PDFs. So I'm sure many of you have already seen that, but in case some have not, that's where you can find that. And so we're working off of that as well and just preparing a little bit earlier for our response. We're doing, if you will, sort of just an evaluation, looking at, the way FDA responds is with concur, non-concur, or partial concur. And we're evaluating that. And they also take a look when the conference places its letter to the federal agencies on the website. It's going to be in a part 1, those that are food code recommended changes, and in part 2, those changes for FDA outside of the food code. And that includes like the program standards, issues that were before the conference this year. So we're actively working to develop our response and evaluate, talk with any SMEs and senior advisors that we need to refer to get our response letter developed. One of the things I wanted to touch on too, we mentioned at the conference that we're looking to take a holistic approach to the TCS definition. There were many questions around that. I think we're like 12 or 13 issues around the TCS definition in some form or other. And so I'm curious if anyone wants to offer today some of the areas that what prompted, what are you signaling to us? What are your needs for us to modify the TCS definition? So we're beginning to work around that, our strategy for taking that approach to looking at the TCS definition and I hope along the way that you could be active in hearing from our states and locals around, what are the concerns there that we need to, what's the problem we're trying, that you want us to fully address. So, but we're starting, of course, with the CFP issues and looking at those that related to that. So that's another thing that's sort of ongoing or getting geared up as we come back from the conference. And I guess I'll stop there, see if there are any questions. Oh, and one other thing I forgot. We're also, the conference will set they're getting ready for the board. Their next board meeting is usually in the fall, and they will at that time put in place all of the committees and that type of thing. And so we're also looking at, how we can best participate as federal consultants and alternates in the committees as well. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Glenda. Does anybody have a question for Glenda while we have her on the call before we jump over to food additives?
Okay, well, if nothing comes to mind right now, feel free to reach back to me, and appreciate the time today to share with you guys, just give you a brief update on where we are post-conference.
All right. Thank you, Glenda. We are happy that you could join us.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. All right, enjoy the rest of the call.
All right. Up next, the reason why you're all here on the call today to hear from Ms. Carolyn White, Retail Food Specialist. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Carolyn so that she can do her discussion on food additives and GRA, and can you add this to food? So, all right, Carolyn, you got the screen share. Do you need me to? All right, awesome. I see it.
All right, so we are in business. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank AFTO for inviting me to speak with you all today. For those who I have not met, my name is Carolyn White, and I am a retail food specialist with FDA's our retail food team. So I'm based out of Kansas City, Missouri, and I work primarily with the states of Illinois and Indiana. And I had the privilege to work with North Carolina over the last year. And I'm excited to get to speak to you, a little bit about this topic. I know we tend to get a ton of questions on food additives and trending substances. And so as you can see, the title of my presentation is, can I add that to food? And, for my fellow millennials, it helps if we hear that title in our brains in Steve Urkel's voice. I think it just sets the tone a little bit better, right? So let's see what we're going to talk about. So today we're going to be discussing, what we mean when we say food additives and the difference between an approved food additive and a GRAS substance. And we're going to talk kind of about those approval pathways as well. And as this call is for the retail audience, right? You all are here because you regulate retail establishments. We're going to have to talk about the FDA food code and where these things fit and how we evaluate these substances in a retail setting. So we're going to walk through a few examples and then we're going to discuss, what to do if you find yourself being asked to give this approval at retail. And it's not going to be just me talking today. We're going to be asking you all, how are you handling some of these things? So if you are familiar with addressing some substances at retail, let's talk about it, because it's one thing to hear FDA, it's another to hear from our partners. So before we get going, right, I have to give a few disclosures. So we're going to talk about current agency position, current pathways, and the current route to approval as they exist today. As we are all aware, additives and GRAS substances are a hot topic on the national stage, and I think we can all kind of acknowledge we're hearing a lot, but we're not privy to any changes. Nothing's taken place yet, so I cannot speak to future policy. I can't speak to future changes on a national scale, so kind of keeping that in mind. I also want to say I cannot change your state laws, right? If I had that power, I'd be making a lot more money. But we'll talk about, again, what does the food code say? What do the CFRs say? How does this really work? But if your state has passed a law saying that a certain substance in food does not make it adulterated, when maybe the CFRs say that it does, I can't rectify that today. It's kind of where we want to start with, right? And again, FDA doesn't have the jurisdiction at retail. You all do. That's up to the state and local pathway, but it's all a partnership. So we're going to get through this together and see where we feel. All right, so we're going to start with the basics. Let's go with, the federal government legal speak, right? Let's get right into directly out of the FD&C Act. And I'm not going to read it to you because that's boring and we don't want to do that, but, I'll boil it down. And so if we look at the definition of a food additive in the CFR, right, which the food code references multiple times, we're going to see that an additive is a substance where its intended use results in its becoming part of the food or otherwise affecting the food's characteristics. It could be, flavoring, sweetener, thickener, leavening, a nonstick spray, packaging material. The list goes on and on. But if it becomes a part of the food or affect its characteristics, it can be considered an additive. Right now, we have a few different types of food additives. We're probably super familiar with direct food additives. So these are added with a specific purpose. And these are things we think of as ingredients, and we are seeing these disclosed on the labels as such. So a great example, xanthan gum. So because I said I wasn't going to be the only one talking, where do we see xanthan gum typically? Let me see if I can pull the chat window up. There we go. All right, so if we see that, what is that used typically for? Throw into chat, don't be shy. Thickener, absolutely, 100%. Yep, it's a thickening agent used in a variety of foods for texture. So it's directly added to the food and it's on the ingredient list, right? So that's our direct food additives, sweeteners, etc. Same thing. Then we get into secondary food additives. And so these are added during the processing of the food. So, like our release agents, so food doesn't stick to equipment, or boiler water additives for products that are steamed during processing, right? So they may become part of the food or in our food additives. They aren't necessarily ingredients, right? They're not intended to remain in the food, but we recognize that in some part, they might. And then we have our indirect food additives, and these are our substances that may become a part of the food simply due to our packaging or storage. This could be our plastics, our paper, our adhesives, our wrapping, all of those things. Right? So we like to start with some good definitions to keep us all on the same page. All right, and so the FDA Act defines food additives so that there can be pre-market approval. However, some items are excluded from this definition, either because there are other approval processes that address them, or because they're excluded from the process entirely. I think part of the reason why this gets so complex is because the process itself is complex. So let's look at some of the exceptions before we get into the basics. So some exceptions to this food additive definition. First and foremost, color additives. I know, hot topic. Color additives are additives, but they have their own separate review and approval process. So if something is imparting color to a food, it must be an approved color additive, even if there is another possible intended use as a food additive. So you're going to hear me say the phrase intended use over and over again, probably so many times. You're going to get off this call and you're going to go intended use. It's going to just stick. But intended use is important to understand, right? So if something imparts color and does something else to the food, we may see that we need two approvals. So we have to have approval in multiple directions. Now I can hear what people are thinking. Now, wait a minute. Lots of things add color to food. Does that mean everything's a color additive? No, not necessarily. So as an example, our food ingredients, such as our cherries or green or red peppers, chocolate, or, orange juice, things that contribute natural color when mixed with other foods are not regarded as color additives. But if a food substance such as, let's say, beet juice, if we're deliberately using beet juice as a color to make, our lemonade pink, that is now a color additive. And so again, we'd have to go through that approval pathway. And there's a regulation that lists those approved colors. And again, intended use, amounts, etc. Pesticides are accepted from, they're not part of the food additive definition. Pesticides are approved by the EPA. As I'm not with EPA, we are not going to touch on those today. And then animal drugs that remain in food, again, separate pathway. They're part of the exception. We're not going to discuss that. Again, another area where we often sometimes see the wires getting kind of crossed. Dietary ingredients in dietary supplements, right? So dietary ingredients and dietary supplements are different altogether. Our dietary ingredients do not have to go through pre-market approval. They do not need to be approved food additives. They do not need to be GRAS. And again, that's going into dietary supplements. Dietary supplements have their own pathway, their own regulations. So it's the dietary supplement company's job to affirm safety and notify FDA of new dietary ingredients and the safety information where they base their conclusions within 75 days of marketing the product. But you kind of maybe have already put together that if our dietary ingredients don't have to be additives, don't have to be GRAS, then they likely are not going to be able to go into food, right? So substances intended for use as dietary ingredients and dietary supplements are accepted from the additive provisions, and they're under the purview of FDA's Office of Dietary Supplement Programs. So we're not going to dig a lot into dietary supplements. We're really going to focus in on food additives, GRAS, those pathways today. One, limited time. Two, that's really kind of the focus that we were asked to look into, but they're listed under those exceptions. And then prior sanctioned ingredients, right? So these are substances that were used prior to the Food Additives Amendment of 1958. So things that were common use prior to then, things like our sodium nitrate for curing meats, right? We've been seeing that used for a very long time. So again, part of that food additive exception. So we're not going to dig into all of those. All right, GRAS substances are also excluded from the definition of food additive, but we're going to go there during this discussion anyway. So we'll go there. Let's go there next. All right, so GRAS, you've heard me say it, it's generally recognized as safe. So GRAS status was carved out in 1958 in that amendment because Congress didn't really want FDA to waste a lot of time on products where scientific data or information was already out there regarding safety. And it made sense, but it does, again, it complicates things. We're good at that. So GRAS substances are those that are generally recognized as safe among qualified experts based on our publicly available scientific information. So again, we're wanting to see publicly available, peer-reviewed research that experts in the field can agree, support the conclusion of safe. A few important things to note. Our GRAS substances still need to meet the same safety standard as additives. There's that reasonable certainty of no harm. And GRAS status is not based on the substance alone, but its intended use. There's that pesky phrase again. But intended use, which includes the amount used, the intended effect, and the foods it's added to. There's not going to be a one size fits all for our GRAS substances. So when we get into GRAS, we really want to look at what we're using it for, how much, and what we're trying to do. So very similar to what FDA looks at when reviewing additives. What's different is that the pathway is different for legal use. All right, so if we look at food additives, right, so we said that they must follow that pre-market approval process and submit evidence of safety for the product and its intended use for review. If FDA approves the petition, it goes to rulemaking. It's then posted in the Federal Register, it gets a registration number, and it's put in the CFR itself along with the stated use information. Conversely, if you see something from FDA that says, we don't see a regulation for this substance, what we're really trying to say is that it's not a listed food additive, right? All approved food and color additives are listed in the CFRs. Now, for our GRAS, there's no pre-market approval, right? There's no really even requirement to notify FDA. Firms can self-affirm their GRAS status and not tell federal government. However, they still must have evidence of safety and general recognition among our scientific experts using our publicly available data, not our proprietary data. So essentially, we can't have one person in a company in a back room saying, it's cool, I've been using it for 20 years and nothing's happened to me. That's not going to fly when it comes to GRAS, right? So we're talking peer-reviewed literature, textbooks, scientific papers. We're talking consensus among experts, not a handful of folks that want to, kind of self-affirm their own genius plan of thought, right? You kind of get what I'm talking about. So what does this mean for GRAS listings, right? So although there is no rulemaking process, there's no complete list, which again leads to some of the complexity that we're dealing with here. There is a partial GRAS list on FDA's site, and we will show the GRAS notice database here shortly, but that's not necessarily exhaustive. But regardless of the pathway, right, our substances must be safe. So again, per the CFRs, there must be a reasonable certainty of no harm, meaning a reasonable certainty in the minds of our competent scientists that the substance is not harmful under the, here we go, intended conditions of use, right? And so, quick note, that's different from drugs, right? So with drugs, there's a risk-benefit analysis. That's why you have all of the lovely little discussions on side effects when you see the commercials. We don't do that with food. It's either safe or it's not. And so as I pointed out, there are regulations listing the approved food and color additives for intended use. And if it's not there, it's not an approved additive. But GRAS listings are not regulations, and the listings on FDA's website are not comprehensive. We talked a bit about companies maintaining their own self-affirmed GRAS status, but if they claim that FDA has responded to their GRAS notice, that will be on our website. So if a firm or an operator is saying that, their self-affirmed GRAS status has been responded to by FDA, it will be there. It has to be there. Now, when FDA responds to a GRAS notification, we look at the substance and its specific use. So if they claim color as part of the intended effect, it cannot be GRAS, and they have to go through the color additive petition pathway. So if color is part of the intended use, we're already out the door with GRAS. We have to go color additive, full to additive. Okay. Now, when we respond to the GRAS notice, it's an opinion letter. It's not a regulation that's issued. So we either say no questions, which essentially means that the agency does not have a question regarding their assessment. You could see a note saying there's an insufficient basis letter if the agency has questions or concerns that were unaddressed in the notice, or if they do not have the basis to conclude safety. And then you may also see cease to evaluate, which essentially means that the company asked FDA to halt or cease their review. So when we're looking for, how to apply this in the field and know that things are acceptable, we're really looking for that no questions, right? We don't want to see things with an insufficient basis being added to food, because that means we have questions regarding that level of safety. So let's show you an example of a GRAS notice that's listed on our website. So here is a GRAS notice number 661, fucoidin concentrate. So you may know this as bladderwrack. It is a polysaccharide derived from brown seaweed. And again, you'll notice that beautiful phrase that we're going to love. The GRAS notice states the intended use. It doesn't just give an umbrella approval. So this particular concentrate is intended for use in baked goods like our bread, cake, noodles. It's intended for use in soups, snack foods, imitation dairy products, and seasonings and flavors up to 30 milligrams per serving. So again, we have the list of foods and the amounts. And you'll also notice here at the bottom of that notice that FDA said no questions. So if someone was using the product in a food that is not listed here, can we use it? So if I want to use this in strawberry smoothies, can I do that? Maybe. No. Yeah, Michelle's correct. It's a no. So again, if we're not using it in the intended use, if it's not in the approved foods, it's a no. If we exceed, if your smoothie counts as an imitation dairy product, that's a good question. But is it an imitation dairy product? If we say no, it's not, then no. If we're going more than 30 milligrams per serving, so if we go 31 milligrams per serving, it's a no. So self-affirmation, and Bailey, we'll get to that. That's a great question. So again, the GRAS notice that is here, that was submitted, is based on this intended use. So if someone's wanting to use any product outside of this notice, well, then we have to evaluate the self-affirmation. So again, if you're going to accept that, now we're talking about reviewing all of their information for their self-affirmation. But what this lets you know is that there is not an approval, but there is a no questions status under this intended use for this amount. So again, self-affirmation, we'll talk about that here in just a little bit, because that does get a little bit more complex. But based on intended use, right here, we know that we have no questions. GRAS status can be used in food based off of that intended use. So excellent. All right, so, or they could do their own petition beyond this. Outside of self-affirmation, a firm could submit this outside of the intended use to FDA to go beyond those limitations. All right, so to kind of sum up our introductory piece, while we don't do pre-market review of foods, we do require that substances added to food be approved additives or GRAS for the intended use. All right, so again, we're retail, so let's talk food code, right? And so 320212 really tells us the bottom line. It's that food served or sold at retail may not contain unapproved food additives or approved additives in excessive amounts. So if you have a food that has ingredients that are not approved, food or color additives, used as listed or otherwise GRAS, it's adulterated. Right? And so 3302.14 says that an operator needs to protect food from unapproved additives. The provision specifically states we cannot add unsafe or unapproved food or color additives, as well as unsafe or unapproved levels of approved food or color additives. So we can't add things that are already considered unsafe or unapproved, as well as the levels. So that intended use always comes back into play. And so those provisions are cited under item 27 if you're using the model inspection form found in Annex 7. And then even taking it a step further, right? 3602.12 says that food must be honestly presented. So if we're making any health claims, right, we may be misrepresenting the food. If we're going so far as to saying something is going to cure, treat, mitigate, prevent a disease, or can stand in for something that does, like our antibiotics, then we're now potentially selling an unapproved drug, and that also is a no-no. So that takes us to a whole different place. So again, we address it specifically. But you'll see the word approved. Now, approved is defined in the food code, but what does approved mean by that definition? So approved based on the regulatory authority, right? Exactly. Jason's right there. So when it comes to approved, again, at retail, you all have a lot of that power. So if we don't have something that's an approved additive, we don't have a GRAS notice, then and when we get to the approval, that's really getting into your wheelhouse of, are we going to approve this substance, potentially based on their self-affirmation? So getting kind of to Bailey's question. All right, so let's look at a flowchart resource to kind of help us determine if a substance can be added to food. Let's walk through an example and just see. All right, so we have an ingredient and its use. So anytime we're wanting to use some kind of new ingredient, new substance, we want to first obviously ask intended use. So the level, the effect, and what foods we're going into. The first question we want to ask, is the ingredient imparting color? Is that part of that intended use? If it's a yes, we will immediately go to the color additives before we go anywhere else. First thing we ask, is it imparting color? Do we have a color additive in the listing in the CFRs? If it's a no, we likely have an unapproved color additive. Now remember, we gave the examples of it's something that naturally does, our cherries, those kinds of things that's naturally giving color, but that's not part of the intended use, we're fine. But if we're imparting color, and that's part of the use, it has to be listed as a color additive. Now, if yes, if we do have a listing and we have it there in the CFRs, the next question we want to ask, are there other non-color uses, right? So we talked earlier that there may be more than one approval pathway required based on the intended use. Y'all gonna be so sick of hearing the words intended use by the end of this, right? So if no, the ingredient use is likely authorized. If it's yes, okay, well then now we need to look at, is the use listed as an approved food additive or as a prior sanctioned ingredient, right? As listed in 21 CFR 172 through 181. So we'll go ahead and check the CFRs for food additive. If that's a yes, we're good to go. If it's a no, all right, then we take it to the next step. Do we have a GRAS notice? Do we have a listed or affirmed as GRAS in the CFRs? Right, we do have some substances that are listed as GRAS in the CFR, so we go there next. If yes, we're good to go. If not, now we're going to go to that database that we have and see if we have a covered GRAS notice that received a no questions letter from FDA. If we have that, we're likely good to go. If not, there may be an unapproved food additive. And if there's specific substances we have questions, you can always send that to pre-market at fda.hhs.gov. That is our Office of Food Additive Safety. I was really hoping they were going to be able to be here today to kind of answer any specific questions and talk a little bit more in depth about the process that they use to review. The stars did not align. We weren't able to make that work. If you'll notice that pre-market only has one E. They removed the E out of the second half of the word. Why we did that, I could not answer that question. So yeah, that's always an option. You can also reach out to your retail food specialist and we can point you in the right direction as well. So lots of ways to do that. And again, back to Bailey's question of what about self-affirmation? What does that look like? But your initial flow chart will look a lot like this. If you can't find it here, we have to decide what we want to do. All right. So let's do some examples based on on some real world ingredients, shall we? Let's take a peek. All right. So activated charcoal. Do you remember when this got super popular and everyone was putting activated charcoal in everything? So here in this example, right, we have charcoal added to not only the ice cream, but the cone. So we need to figure out how it's being used. Is it being used as a food ingredient? Yep, it's directly added to the food. So we need to make sure it's an approved food additive, or if it's grass, right? But there's another layer here. That black color, it's meaningful. It's intended. It's part of the appeal, right? So the charcoal is also being used as a color additive. Now, based on our flow chart that we just walked through, when something is used as a color additive, we want to start there. And as we discussed, all color additives must be listed in the CFR. There are no exceptions. There's no grass pathway for color. So if we search the CFRs for color additives, what we will find is that charcoal is not approved for that use. At this point, we could stop and call this food adulterated. It's a no-go. However, for the sake of the example, let's keep going. So we'll continue to figure out if it's an approved food ingredient. So then the next step, as we mentioned, we go look in the CFRs and we find that charcoal can only be used as an indirect food additive as a processing aid. But that's not what we're doing here, right? The charcoal is being directly added to the food, so this listing does not cover that use. So then we take it to the grass inventory and we don't find charcoal there either. So again, at this point, we already know we have something that is adulterated. We have an unapproved color additive. We didn't find it anywhere, so we don't want to approve use of this product. All right, let's do a different one. Let's try chlorella. So this is a green algae that grows in freshwater. What's the first question we have to ask though, right? Hey, I want to use this substance. First question we ask is, Gwen, good point. So for our green algae, for chlorella, first thing we want to ask is, again, it's that pesky intended use, right? So we have to have information about how it's being used. So in this case, it's being used as a milk or cream replacement in a breakfast shake. So it's a direct food additive, it's an ingredient, and in this case, it's not really being used as a color additive. So even though it's a really pretty green color, that color is not essential for its use. So we're going to start our review with the CFRs for direct food additives, and we don't see anything there. And so then our next step is going to be to look at the grass inventory. And so we're gonna walk through that. All right, and so that is our link. I'll go ahead and throw that in the chat towards the end for our grass inventory. You can also Google, FDA grass inventory should pop right up, and you can search again by keyword. So here's our inventory. Here's where it starts. So as you can see, we type chlorella in the search field. And we get a list. So you'll notice a few things. The first, there are oils listed, then there are powders and flours. So in our case, we're not dealing with an oil. And if we look at the packaging, it's actually considered a flour. So again, so at the bottom three are out. So we're really focused on items 2 through 4 on this list. And so you may have to go through and read those individual notices, and then we find the one that fits the intended use. And here we are. How convenient, right? So our grass notice 469 covers the intended use as a replacement for milk or cream in a variety of products, including beverages, at a level ranging from 5 to 120 grams per kilogram. And if we look to the bottom, as we mentioned, FDA had no questions. So this product can be used at the levels indicated as a milk or cream substitute. All right, so can we go ahead and say yes to this? Absolutely, for the intended use. All right, but addressing this at retail, so we talked about kind of the pathways, right? We talked pathways of, taking a substance, going through the CFRs, the grass, but, practicality. How are we going to identify some of these things? So some of our most common ways are going to be through the menu review. These are particularly true for our trending substances, as those tend to be featured on menus and menu boards. And I think we can all agree it would be ideal for our operators to reach out prior to implementation. We recognize that's not always the case. How often do our inspectors find something being used during an inspection and have to assess in real time? Fairly often. So you may see these substances at retail during your inspections. And if you come across a substance that seems unfamiliar, how do you want to handle that? Well, first and foremost, our favorite question, intended use, right? So we want to ask, how we keep using that phrase, but it's really the key to all of these determinations, right? So if we know how we're using it, what we're using it in, and the intended use, we can check the CFRs and the grass inventory. You may want to do this right out in the field. This similar to kind of checking our shellfish shippers list in the field to track our tags. You may need to refer to those resources, to our CFRs and our grass listing, to determine if something can be used in food. And if you don't find it listed as an approved additive, or you cannot find it with a no questions response from FDA in the grass notice inventory, and your department has not approved substances use in food, then you likely have an unapproved additive being used. So again, then we mark that under those provisions in the code we listed under item 27. And so what happens if the operator wants to demonstrate that they have a self-affirmed grass status? So getting back to Bailey's question is, how do we do this in retail, right? So we'll talk about the next slide. So menu reviews are a really great place, the pre-opening inspection, or that application process. And a lot of times you'll see that listed easily. You may find something during inspection. Hey, what's this? What do you use it for? Right. So those using that good risk-based approach to ask those good questions. So if we're going to be evaluating grass claims at retail, as I mentioned earlier, an operator is not required to come to FDA with a request for review of their grass notice. They don't have to. But again, if you're going to be approving something to be used at the retail level, you may find yourself needing to evaluate someone's grass determination should you choose to do so. Because again, if approved is based on the regulatory authority, then do you have the authority to say, no, we're not using that? You do. Right. So if we're going to evaluate something, if we're going to evaluate those grass claims at retail, how do we do that? So what we would like to recommend, again, is using that CFR, 21 CFR 170, it's 0.203 to 285 as a guide, because that's essentially, you're looking at what FDA is asking for when someone submits their grass notification. And there's a lot of stuff here. So as always, intended use is at the top of the list of all of our required information, and that's going to include any of the foods in the substance will be used, the levels in such food, and the purposes for which the substance will be used. We don't give blanket approvals for anything. That's just not, it's not a one size fits all. We know that that's not how that works based on the pathways that we've already discussed. So some other submitted information will include full identification of the substance down to chemical names or taxonomic sources and any known toxicants. You want a complete description of the method of manufacture, any relevant safety data or technical effect that the substance is intended to produce. You're going to want to ask for data and information on the dietary exposure, right? So this is the amount of relevant substances that our consumers are likely to eat and drink as part of a total diet. So do we have that information? Do we have any data on self-limiting levels of use or any common use experience prior to 1958, right? That could really help inform your decision. And then we want that full narrative and supporting scientific data, kind of as we talked about earlier, needs to be submitted. So do we have peer review? Do we have consensus in the scientific community that this is safe to use in food? If you're to approve a substance, again, as we noted, keeping approved means accepted to the regulatory authority. Wouldn't you want as much information as possible to make the safest decision that you can? So yeah, for the full listing, there's a lot more in there. I went over the basics of what is asked. If you want the full details, I recommend looking at that CFR. Is common history of use in food prior to 1958 limited to use in United States? That's a phenomenal question, Bailey. I will ask our additives folks. My gut instinct says yes, use in the US, but I don't want to speak for additives folks, so I will add that to our list. As I said, I'm a retail food specialist. I was hoping to have additives folks with us. So I have asked Deanna to keep any questions that I am unable to answer because I want to make sure you have the most correct information. And we will ensure that we get those answers back out to the entire group so we have consistency in that response. So great question, but my gut reaction and assumption is 1958 would be things that have been common in use within the country of that regulation. So, but great question. I really like that question. He's coming with the heat today. Okay, so, as the regulatory authority issuing the license or permit, or covering the inspection, the responsibility for approval of a number of things often falls to you all. So, I can sit up here and yap all day, but I'd really like to open up the floor, to our partners, as sharing across our jurisdictions it's really the most beneficial. So I want to, kind of pause here and ask if anyone has conducted their own evaluation of an operator's grass claim. And can you talk to us a little bit about how that went for you and what your process is like? Has anyone on the call done that? I'm not seeing any hands raised. That is okay. So then if we have not done so, if we've not evaluated someone's self-affirming status, Ohio has, but not for retail manufacturing only. Okay. If you were to do so for retail, would that take a similar pathway? Okay. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you did for the manufacturing side at least, so we have kind of an idea of what Ohio has done? Would you be willing to come off mute, Bailey?
Yeah, I'm in an open office, so I try to keep myself on mute. Ours was an ashwagandha extract that a juice and fresh raw juice firm was wanting to use, as well as in some other beverages of theirs. And it was a pharmaceutical company out of India that has created this extract. And they had, just everything that they could possibly need for submitting a notification to FDA. They just didn't, So it had everything that you've talked about in it. It was a very well done uh, piece of data and everything that they had. It was a lot of it and took quite a while to sort through. And we reached out to FDA's food additive folks quite a bit for their expertise and knowledge. And then most recently, I think right now we're dealing with retail right now is Kava. So we're venturing into that right now as well, working through it. We've
Kava
seen
is
things
Kava.
from California, Michigan, Hawaii, the World Health Organization. Like we're pulling that kind of information too because of the common history in tea. That's why I was asking about its use here, specific to the United States, because it's very common and has been for centuries in the Philippines and other countries. So that's what we're working on right now.
I will note with kava, if it's brewed with water by itself, that is considered a conventional food and doesn't require any further approval. That one is technically good.
Right.
It's when we get into any other use that gets sticky.
Yes. Yeah, and that's where so far I think we're leaning we're sticking with the dietary ingredient intended for dietary supplements. I think is where I think our agency is going to wind up firming their feet. But they've got some more records and things to look through, which I get to be a part of on the periphery.
Thank you for sharing. Anybody else feeling brave? Has anybody else had to handle one of these before? I see Julie came off mute.
Hi, it's Julie Wagendorf, North Dakota. We did also review kava. We do allow just that brewed in plain water as a conventional food, but not allowing any other ingredients. And the kava bar that was looking to open in North Dakota had it added in about every type of smoothie you could dream of. And so based on their intended use, we said no. Outside of what they were allowed to use it for, was just being steeped in plain water as tea. We've looked into ashwagandha. We have seen a self-affirmed grass status dossier that also looked legit, but our review with FDA was maybe a little bit different from what Iowa had. So I'm extremely interested in Ohio, I believe that was. Extremely interested with who Ohio talked to, because the pre-market people at FDA told us that ashwagandha and the grass dossier that we looked at was not legit. However, we didn't feel like we had the expertise to disprove it. And so we did accept it until we get, any other like more information to help us make a better decision, because they did provide the letter of the law, which is a self-affirmed GRAS status dossier. And there's some instances where we've gotten those self-affirmed GRAS status, and this is at retail, by the way. And it is difficult to ascertain whether or not it is maybe acceptable by a scientific community when you've got one example and it was not publicly available. It was something we had to ask for and ask for multiple times and wait months for. So I feel like it's extremely difficult to regulate. Seeing the slides, I appreciate your presentation, and we've had similar presentations from our retail specialist as well. And I feel like I have a good understanding of how the laws work. It's just in real life, trying to implement this and explaining what can be used and what can't be used has been a real big challenge for us. And yeah, I just thought I'd share that. We're looking into chaga mushrooms right now for use in coffee. So it feels like something comes up every other week for us, and we're constantly looking into these things.
And I think we see that often, right? The trending new thing, it starts at retail. It doesn't start at a national level. Something goes viral and it immediately hits at the retail level. Did anyone have butter candles come up? Not that that's necessarily additive specific, but that went TikTok viral, flash in the pan, and we had questions coming in about butter candles, right? So, but retail gets the stuff first. And that's what my colleagues over at Additive Safety always talk about, how we get, retail gets the new thing, the weird thing, the crazy thing, the new use. And we see it first. So it is a challenging pathway. And Paul, to your question, I guess what we're saying is kava, when steeped in water by itself, is considered a conventional food, and that use is not questioned by the agency. Anything outside of that has to go through some of those pathways. So, and again, as I mentioned at the beginning, I cannot change state law. So some of this really does come down to, what is the retail community? How are you all handling? That's what I want to say. Like, I can say things all day. And, Julie, you make a really good point, is we have the CFRs, we have the GRAS, we have the food code. It's hard to cover everything when things move so quickly. So did anybody else have any good examples? Has anybody else evaluated a substance for someone's self-affirming GRAS notification or anything of that nature? Or does anyone not accept self-affirming whatsoever? We just say no if it's not an additive, and if it's not with a GRAS notice, we say no. Let's go the other direction. Anybody do that? We would like to. Okay, there you go. So yeah, there are options, and I know it's a challenge. These pathways, they are complex. The way a lot of times things seem to intertwine and overlap, it immediately gets complex. I like hearing that both Ohio and Julie, your department, and Dakota's, I like hearing that you, again, consult OFAS. They are the experts. I will say, I am not an additive expert. I could not tell you the process of how someone takes and evaluates all those things, right? But we want to make sure that we're partnering with folks that do have that expertise to make some of those decisions. Okay. Anyone else have anything they want to throw in or share? If not, that is all right also. All right, we're quiet today. It's a quiet Tuesday. All right. So with that, we'll pull the screens back up. I don't have a lot left. This was going to be kind of a quick and dirty version, right? So then we might get to the question of, so what can we add to food, right? So kind of getting to more of a closing, I really hope this has been at least a little bit helpful. Like I said, we recognize it is complex, but if you at least have an idea of some of the pathways, some of the tools that can assist you, hopefully we can make this a little less painful, a little, not 100%. I can't guarantee pain-free, but we will try. With that, does anyone have any other specific questions that I can attempt to answer or promise to get a good answer on? Because I am not all knowing. I'm not seeing anything in chat. Give it another minute or two just in case. But if not, like I said, please feel free to reach out to your retail food specialist. If you're not sure who your retail food specialist is, we have a directory on our website, or I can tell you, just ask and I'll let you know. But again, we're always here and willing to help. And again, thank you to Deanna, thank you to Steve for bringing this topic. I hope moving forward we can bring the additives folks in next time to really dig in a little bit to folks' questions on the more of the process of how FDA does some of that analysis. But I hope it's been helpful for you. We're ending a little bit early, but I'll toss that back to Deanna if no one has any other good questions.
Not seeing anything additional in the chat. Carolyn, if you'd let's see, I'll stop your sharing. I think I've only got one more slide, so not a whole lot more for today. But I did want to thank all of you for your time and joining us today. We have another call scheduled already on the books. You'll be receiving an invitation for it soon, and that's going to be for May 27th. Thank you for your patience for the delay in this call, but we all had CFP on our calendar, and we knew we had to work around that schedule with it being in March this year. So our next call will be May the 27th, and we will have the short evaluation to follow. And I want to say thank you so much to Carolyn. And thank you to all of you who suggested this topic. This was a lot of fun, and I was happy to see the participation on the call. And this has been one of our most well-attended calls. So again, thank you for your suggestions. Obviously, you guys know what's going to be of most value to you. So please keep those ideas coming our way. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time.